Okay, guys. Good morning, all. I think we're just about ready to make a start. So hopefully you guys can all still hear me okay. Good morning, all. I think we're just about ready to make a start. Hopefully you guys can all still hear me okay. Oh, somebody is give me 1 second. There is a terrible echo there. Give me 1 second. Let me just sort this out. 1 second. There is a Hi guys. Hopefully that's a little bit better now. Perfect. Right, let me share my screen with you guys. So, guys, today it's going to be myself from Netgear. So my name's Kieran. I am the ProAV channel manager, business development manager, and technical manager for Netgear business in UK and Ireland. And just promoted to be a panelist with me is Mark Collins from Kramer Electronics UK. Mark is the tech support and training specialist. Say good morning, Mark. There we go.
Hi there, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
I think I've just figured out where my So without further ado, really appreciate you guys joining us this morning. Myself and Mark, we're gonna drive you through some of the stuff that we've got going on, both independently and together in terms of education, which is quite a nice piece, quite relevant at the moment, I think. And we're also gonna actually walk you through, and Mark's gonna do the heavy lifting on this, and he's gonna talk you through the joint case study that Netgear and Kramer have developed working together. It's actually quite cool because it's actually based not on one of Kramer or Netgear's customers per se, but it's actually Kramer's training facilities based in the UK that we've teamed up to upgrade and get up to spec. So that's going to be quite a cool one. Now, for my piece, I'm going to talk you through a little bit of what we do in ProAV. It may not be so familiar to some of you guys out there, and talk you through some of our training offerings that we've got. There is a chat window that some of you have probably already seen. So if you do have any questions along the way, please do pop them in the chat window, and we'll try and answer as we go. Or we shall also have some time at the end for any questions we don't get to, and we'll spend a portion at the end of the webinar just running through those questions. If you feel like it might be a silly question and you don't want to put your name to it, there is also a Q&A tab. So you can pop it in the Q&A tab. And that way, if you so wish, we will not be able to see who asked the question, but you'll still get it answered. So you've got loads of options there. We do want this to be an interactive session. So if you do want to get involved, please do put your questions and put your comments in there as we go, and we'll discuss them live on air. So without further ado, what do Netgear have to do with AV over IP? Very good question. Now, I think it is probably Netgear are probably more recognized as a traditional networking manufacturer. We are and have been. We are over 20 years old now. We have one owner, one founder, in fact two, our CEO and CTO, Mr. Patrick Lowe and Mr. Mark Merrill, who are the CEO, CTO and co-founders of Netgear. And we are a traditional networking company. We make everything in the retail space, from home routers, power line adapters, all that good stuff, meshing Wi-Fi systems. And then in business, in the area that I work in, We obviously make all types of things: switching, Wi-Fi, storage, security. Today from Netgear, we're going to focus in on two key bits of what we do in the switching world that are dedicated to AV over IP, and should be relevant to what you guys are all doing out there in the world. Now, this is what AV over IP looks like with Netgear. So very similar, if you will, to a matrix switch, but we're now looking at an IP switch replacement. And for us and for you, and for users of AV over IP, there are a lot of benefits that come with using an AV over IP system, and especially with Netgear, and we'll talk you through those as we get through the webinar. The obvious ones are things like increased flexibility and scalability. Ethernet ports are fully bi-directional, full duplex networking. So if we're doing 1 gig, we can do 1 gig in both directions at the exact same time. In terms of scalability, if I take something like a 16 by 16 matrix system, if I wanted to expand that system, it's going to be complicated. It's going to be potentially add-on modules, even potentially a whole new system that I have to run parallel, or rip and replace my smaller system with an even bigger system. When we start to look at Ethernet and we look at IP technology, we need to expand a system here with what I've got, which is one of our M4300 AV over IP switches. All I have to do is add another switch and connect those up, and my network still remains as one. Although similar to a matrix switch, I will have two switches. The actual network itself and connectivity remains as one unified network. So in terms of expanding a system, it's very simple with an IP switch. And we have a few things nestled into our firmware and software that make that even simpler for you. Unmatched density. So we're pretty scalable in the products that we sell into ProAV. We start all the way down at small switches, 8 ports, and we can scale all the way up to 96 ports in the particular model that you see there, all in one switch. So you've got a lot of options there, as well as the ability to expand out into multiple switches. Shared infrastructure and standards. AV-IT convergence is probably a term that a lot of us have heard throughout the last 12 to 24 months. And it's something that's happened. We've seen it before, especially at Netgear. We see these things, and we've seen it happen with things like telephones and VoIP systems. We've seen a big shift with things like CCTV over to IP CCTV. And we're certainly, and it's been going on for a long time. I know there's a lot of spotlight on it at the moment, but we are seeing now the big shift towards IP with audio and video. Obviously with things like all the different codecs, you got SDVoE that we'll talk about, AVB, Ordinate, QSYS, all the different types of technology that are all now converging over IP. So the ability to build an infrastructure that can host all of your services down one cable, be it your IT or your AV. And pre-configured plug and play. And this is one of the really important things, especially for guys out there deploying AV over IP systems, where all Netgear switches, and I won't run through it all just yet, but are optimized for 4K 60 video out of the box and pre-configured for AV over IP out of the box. So we'll talk you through what that means for you. Now, the very inset, what that means is cheaper ports, as you can see there. And take this as a rough ballpark, but you can be looking up to a 10-to-1 price drop when you look at a matrix switcher in comparison to a IP switch from Netgear. Now, I'll touch on this briefly, Netgear and the SDVoE Alliance. If you don't know what the SDVoE Alliance is, it is the Software-Defined Video over Ethernet Alliance. Netgear and Kramer are both members of this. It's a really cool ecosystem. It's not all we do, but it is a big part of what we do. So obviously we know Netgear is a global networking company. We build a business all around innovation and bringing products to both businesses, service providers, and consumers, and all built about reliability and ease of use. And that's part of what we're trying to bring to the AV side now. Now, we are a founding member of the SDVOE. We are addressing the requirement of IP in the AV industry, and we commit to manufacturing switches that are SDVOE compliant to fulfill that requirement. And it doesn't just stop at SDVOE; it addresses AV over IP in a whole. But all Netgear M43 and M4500 switches are ready for instant flawless delivery of 4K 60 frames a second video over IP with zero touch configuration. Now, loads of members of the SDVOE. I'm not going to run through them all. Obviously, you can see you've got Kramer right there on the left as a contributing member, and Netgear right there in the middle as a founding member. It is a very good ecosystem, and it allows multiple manufacturers to work together for one shared goal and cause, which ultimately provides a better ilk of product for you guys out there using it. It is a non-profit consortium, and I would highly recommend getting over to sdvoe.org if you get the chance. And I know we're taking a big play into education today. They also have academy.sdvoe.org. They've got a lot of free learning material on there. You don't pay for anything. They have courses for guys from AV looking at the IT side, vice versa, IT looking at AV. A lot of stuff on networking on there, on standards, and there's also their design partner certification, which you can take all online, get yourself certified by the SDVOE, and they'll pop their details on your website. So academy.sdvoe.org, great place to go and find some free learning that's valuable to guys coming in from both sides. This is where we're aiming for at Netgear. So the AV market has a huge kind of different plethora of verticals on there, be it things like digital signage, CCTV in terms of IP, servers, cinemas. Don't think there's too many cinemas that operate on reels anymore. It's all digital storage, digital players, cable satellite boxes, IPTV system. The list goes on. But the IP switch is relevant to all of those bits. And our two main forms of transport are either going to be copper in terms of things like Cat 6A, Cat 7, or even Cat 5A, Cat 5E, sorry, if you're on a really short run for things like 10 gigabit. And then you've got 10 gigabit fiber, which then expands the realms to upwards of kilometers, so a maximum of 10 kilometers per fiber run. So you could potentially have an encoder and decoder that could be 20 kilometers apart when you start to look at an AV over IP solution. And I could have 48 encoders and 48 decoders all on this switch, and they could all be 20 kilometers apart from each other and all 10 kilometers apart from the switch. So we are being, and we certainly do see a big shift to fiber. If you think about the type of runs you make, things like concert venues, sports venues, offices, you can quickly find yourself in a realm of being over that 100-meter limit on copper cable. With that type of IP solution, be it copper or fiber, looking at zero frame latency when looking at an SDVOE solution, but obviously depending on the use case, you may not need to be or want to be in an SDVOE solution. There are loads of 1 gig solutions out there, so it all depends on the use case, be it things like IPTV where latency is acceptable, or potentially live medical where latency isn't acceptable, the same with artifacts. So it all depends on the use case, but the best quality video takes bandwidth, so does the least quality video. And certainly for us, and what we try to instill with people through our training programs, is bandwidth and uplink bandwidth requirements is one of the most important things. And some of this can get a little bit complicated with things like multicast traffic and working out what goes where in the network and what traverses different switches. So this can be kind of helpful sometimes. It's also included in our training courses, just as a rough guide on what you would be looking at for different bandwidths, and then being able to work out what you would be looking at in terms of the requirements on your switching network. Because bandwidth is one of the most key parts that we try and instill knowledge into people in networking. And in IT, we come from a place where very often we overload what we would refer to as our uplink ports on IP networks. If I have a 24 port 1 gig switch, maybe I have a 10 gig uplink, which obviously is not a big enough bandwidth for all of my ports at 1 gig. But then what are the odds in an IT environment that all of my users on a 24 port 1 gig switch are going to be using 1 gig all the time? Probably not very high. And so we do tend to oversubscribe all of our uplinks. With AV over IP, it's a different environment. If Mark tells me he's going to be pushing out a 10 gig video stream from their KDS6s, then he absolutely will be doing 10 gigabit, or a little bit under for SDVoE. So what Mark says, I have to adhere to. So we're no longer in a scenario with AV over IP where we can oversubscribe uplinks. So it's one of the most important design considerations when we do create and teach AV over IP, is that if I have 24 ports of AV streams, it absolutely is what it says on the tin, and we need to cater for the worst case bandwidth scenarios. Now, just a little quote there from Mike Morgan that's quite nice and quite true. Moving on, but like I said, at current we do sell over 130 different switch models of note currently, but the two main switch series that will be relevant to guys in AV over IP would be our M4300 series and our M4500 series. So these are our dedicated ProAV switches. We do sell other switches. So depending on the requirement, obviously we do have a whole 115 more switches in our product lineup that can be good in AV scenarios, depending on the use case, be it things like lectins, Wi-Fi, all types of stuff that goes into AV deployments. But the core bits we're going to look at today, and certainly the key ProAV lineups from Netgear are these two. We do commit, like I said, to making everything easy to use and out of the box in terms of your deployments. What does that translate to? Generally, these 4 things. There are a few others. Things like jumbo frames are also enabled, but the 4 key things that we enable out of the box are these: IGMP snooping enabled on VLAN 1, IGMP querier, IGMP fast leave, and drop unregistered multicast traffic from flooding, all enabled on VLAN 1. So these 4 things out of the box are all pre-configured. So you could take one of those boxes, plug in an entire Kramer system, and that should just work without you ever having to log on to the switch. Now, the reality is, certainly myself, I am a systems engineer by trade and a techie. I certainly wouldn't rock up to a customer site trusting that. So a lot of what we'll talk about is the education piece, where we want to teach you how to replicate those settings, be it potentially your customer uses VLAN 2 or 3 or 4, and you need to replicate our pre-configuration settings from VLAN 1 to the VLAN that your customer uses. How do I upgrade the firmware, right? These are key things. It's probably been in a warehouse for a while. It may not be on the updated firmware. We at Netgear have a pretty aggressive approach to introducing AV over IP features into that. So you always want to make sure that you're on the latest firmware to take advantage of that. So things like that. How do I back up configs, save configs, all these types of things? How do I create VLANs, LACP? These are all types of things that we run you through on a training course. But out of the box, those 4 things are pre-configured. This is what the lineup looks like. I'm not going to go into needs and speeds today. I want to keep it as close to education as possible. But within this lineup, for the M4300 series, there is everything from 24 and 48 port 1 gig switches with 10 gig uplinks, PoE, non-PoE. You've got half and half, copper and fiber, all of active at the same time. So if you've got a blended environment of copper and fiber, there's products for you in there. There is 10 gig copper PoE, multi-gig copper PoE. So even if you're introducing things like Wave 2 Wi-Fi access points, or you're powering different devices in there, you've got 2.5, 5 gig, 10 gig PoE and non-PoE ports. You've got the chassis switch down there at the bottom, which is built on 8-port modular. So you can buy 8-port modules in multi-gig, PoE multi-gig, 1 gig, 10 gig fiber, and also 40 gig. And all of these are what we would call a stackable platform with non-stop forwarding. So they're all from the same series of switch. It's one firmware for the entire family. And you can you can stack all these as one virtual switch. The backplane speed is line rate on all of these switches, so they are all line rate switches. So if you've got 96 ports of 10 gig, you can do 96 ports in both directions of 10 gig at the exact same time. So you're never gonna suffer from a backplane on any Netgear switch that is underpowered in terms of the amount of ports that you've got on the switch. And obviously, the M4300s we know is SD-VOE certified, as well as AV over IP certified, right? So not just SD-VOE, but AV over IP. So that's the M43. The one of note that I'm gonna talk you through is, we'll just dive you a little bit deeper in for a reason that Mark will explain, is the 96X. This is the daddy, if you will, of the family. So it's the biggest one in there. As you can see, it comes as an empty chassis, and you've got port cards for 100, 1, 2.5, 5, and 10 gig. There's a PoE version of that. It can do up to 48 ports of PoE. You've got a 40 gig QSFP plus port card in there. So if you fully pop, it could be a 24 port 40 gig switch. The obvious reason we have the 40 gig is to create bigger bandwidth networks, so we can move more video traffic around there. And then you've got the SFP plus port card, which can do 1 gig or 10 gig. So you can do a multitude of options on that particular switch. There is also a HDMI encoder module. So you can place HDMI encoders that load directly into the switch, are powered by the switch. That's a pretty cool thing. I'm not going to talk too much about that today. If you do have questions, just let me know. And there is an online configurator. Don't worry about writing any of this, guys. If you are, because we will send a copy of these slides out with you. And these are our M4500 switches. And these are our 100 gig enabled switches, which might sound crazy, but if you think about the logic, if we got to the high end of AV over IP, you're going to be looking at 10 gigabit streams. And if I take 10 streams and all of a sudden I have to move those from switch A to switch B, instantly I found myself very quickly into a requirement of 100 gig. So AV over IP is actually one of the, and in fact probably the biggest driver at Netgear in terms of the network speeds we provide on switches. So AV over IP, and these M4500s are dedicated ProAV switches. They're only sold into ProAV. So ProAV has actually driven us into a networking space that's faster than Netgear have ever gone before, which is quite a cool thing. Now, these particular switches, the two in the range. The top one is the 48 ports of 1 gig, 10 gig, and 25 gig, all in fiber. There is also fiber module converters, so you can convert those ports back to either 1 gig copper or 10 gig copper. And then you've got 8 dedicated ports of 40/50/100 to create some big bandwidth backbones, and then really aimed as a central switch to the really large AV deployments is our 32C, which is 32 ports of 40/50/100 gig. So a pretty big switch there. They're all full layer 3, both these and the M43s, and they are all configured with the same pre-configuration and AV over IP settings, which also includes IGMP Plus, which I haven't spoken about yet, but I'm going to tell you this is one of the key things that we brought out into our ProAV lineup based on the feedback and real life scenarios that we were seeing deployed in ProAV. Now, I can see. In fact, I will answer your question, but I will answer it just towards the end. Now, this is our commitment to how we roll in ProAV and on our managed switching lineup. So everything comes with lifetime tech support, lifetime next business day warranty, and lifetime hardware warranty. And that's for the lifetime that you own the product, not for the lifetime that we make it. So Netgear lifetime means lifetime. So it's a pretty inclusive warranty. Everything you pay is including the cost. You get 24/7 telephone support for 90 days, and you get 24/7 lifetime chat support, goes through to the very same people. We obviously have things like our community.netgear.com website. And we also have, which is a really key service that we offer in the ProAV world, our ProAV design team. and you can contact those, and I'm going to talk you through that in a second, because this is going to be one of the key takeaways of today's session. Now, just in multicast, there is a big shift, and this is part of education. This is actually taken from some of our bits that we teach about how to deploy AV over IP networks, but existing infrastructure is already oversubscribed. 10 gig backbone is required, even if you choose AV over IP products that are restricted to 1 gig. So there is a big argument out there that potentially you don't need to be on 10 gig if you are looking at a 1 gig solution. And certainly the feeling from Netgear is, well, actually, maybe you do. So it doesn't always necessarily mean 10 gig at the end point. It can actually mean 10 gig on the backbone. And 10 gig for a backbone, even on a 1 gig solution, is becoming more and more relevant. So the real question is whether you're placing 10 gig at the edge or if you're placing it on the backbone of your network. But in some way, shape, or form, it can play a very big part on what you do when you deploy an AV over IP system. For us in the networking world, and what really matters to us from a switching standpoint isn't necessarily the codec or quality or latency. That's not something that we see. Like I said, for us, it's the bandwidth and how that bandwidth fills up. And if I, in fact, just skip the slide there. So obviously where you can see on the left-hand side, in the middle, actually, you can see my bandwidth. For us, this is what it looks like when we're coming switch to switch. If you take A to B, and all of a sudden we filled up 10 gig, we don't have a big enough bandwidth. For us, that's one of the key considerations. And then multicast IGMP, which in itself can start to get complicated when you're deploying in larger and larger solutions. These are our key takeaways. Now, IGMP Plus is something that's not, say, an IEEE, if you're familiar, feature. This is something specific to Netgear. Now, in a standalone solution, when Netgear first became kind of really heavily involved in the ProAV side of things, which it has been for the last few years, we quickly realized that in a one switch solution, it was very simple. It can be plug and play. I can plug everything in. It just works all at layer 2, same VLAN, pre-configuration settings that we provide will do the job for you. When we introduce second switches, third switches, fourth switches, and make this a whole entire network-wide deployment, we then have to look at multicast routing and having to route the multicast traffic from switch to switch. That in itself can introduce a whole load of problems. You could be potentially looking at things like layer 3 PIM routing if you have had the pleasure of having to deploy it. IGMP across multiple switches, potentially access control lists to block certain traffic from spreading throughout your network. And with IGMP Plus, which we configured, it looks a little bit like this. So if I take scenario left, would be a network without IGMP Plus. I've got my spine switch, my 2 leaf switches, I've got my TX for my encoders and my RX for my decoders. And as you can see, my encoders, TX1 and TX2, are both sending their traffic to the spine switch. So potentially, if I'm thinking that's 2 different sources, so it's 2 separate video streams, 2 separate multicast video streams, I'm now taking 20 gig worth of bandwidth. If I'm looking at SDVoE technology at the very top, so the potential is to be up to 20 gigs worth of bandwidth that I'm taking away from my network there on that spine switch, which if we look at leaf switch 2 is an absolute waste of bandwidth, because in fact, only RX4 is ever wanting to receive the stream from TX1. So without IGMP Plus, by using just multicast routing, PIM, and connecting my switches together, I'm now using double the bandwidth. So I'm having to provide a bandwidth requirement even bigger than my actual network needs. Whereas with IGMP Plus, and like I said, this is specific to the Netgear M43s and M4500 switches, and to Netgear in particular, I can see that my traffic actually only ever, skip the slide there, my traffic actually only ever goes from TX1 to RX4. So with IGMP Plus, we actually know that nobody on leaf switch 2 wants to receive anything from TX2. in which case we will not send that traffic up to the spine switch. We will only ever send it to the switch that that device is connected on. Should on leaf switch, say, RX3 want to receive the stream from TX2, or vice versa, maybe TX3 or 4 want to send video streams back to leaf switch 1, then as soon as that comes in, we will allow and send those video streams across. But we will only ever send the video stream if you actually require it to be on a separate switch, which will save you an awful lot of bandwidth and hopefully make a cleaner, more cost-effective and less congested network in terms of ProAV deployment. So this is actually one of the really key features that we've introduced based on what we were seeing out there in the AV over IP world, and this I can certainly tell you from deploying AV over IP solutions is a really important key feature that will save you a lot of time, and it's relevant to whichever need and speed that you are doing. So be it you're doing 1 gig, this is what a potential 1 gig 6060 would look like. If you're doing anything up, this is a 64 by 64 at 10 gig with a fully resilient spine, all the way up to 160 by 160. Obviously we know the 48 can do both 1 gig, 10 gig, 25 gig, copper or fiber, depending on the modules that you have placed in. So that can be a good blended architecture switch where you're running a multitude of speeds. Maybe you're doing IPTV streaming and SDVOE, and all the way up to something like this, which is a 300 by 320 with something like the KDS6 SDVOE encoders and decoders, fully line rate, and all individual sources and individual receivers with full redundancy, knowing that if I lost one of those spine switches, then everything would remain up. So that's a pretty quick run through on kind of where we are in the ProAV world. And the bit that we've been looking to get to is this, which is our education and services. So currently at Netgear, we've got 2 main options for ProAV. So we have an online learning academy. It's called netgear.academy. No .com, literally just netgear.academy. You can find it online. It's live now. There are, like I said, 2 main courses. We have an instructor-led course and we have an online course. Unfortunately, as you can imagine, the instructor-led course is not running at the moment, but as soon as we are up and running again, then we can get those going. The online course is available now. We're doing both instructor-led for the online version, where me or my colleague Neil Smart will sit on with you, or you can look at just doing it yourself, self-paced. So there's no need to have an instructor if you don't want to. You can just go and do it in your own time. Both of those will result in a certification, both from Netgear and Avixa. So you do get CTSRU credits for sitting any of our ProAV courses. We are up and running. That's actually a little photo of our office there with Matt Dodd from SDVOE Academy. So we have the potential to run the SDVOE Academy live. That's their partner design certification. If you're looking for it, do reach out when we're back up and running and the world is open again. Loads of webinars, loads of open days that we do. So we do loads of demos and stuff. We're based in Bracknell. I know Kramer obviously based in Aylesbury, so we're not a million miles away from each other. We have a pretty open door facility. Well, we did before everything's going on. Maybe we'll have to buy some hazmat suits, but I'm sure that will pick up again. So in the future, if anybody wants to come and check stuff out, have a play, have a test, we've got loads of stuff. We've got multiple video walls in our office. We've got all types of screens, encoders, decoders, Dante, everything up and running. Our conference room at the bottom is actually now a video wall as well. There's loads of stuff that people can come on and play. And when we do the instructor-led courses, you guys will obviously all get a switch each that you configure throughout the day. This is what our portal looks like. It's free to join. Like I said, netgear.academy. Get yourselves over and registered on that. We've got to do is click the new account button, register, and you'll get an email and you can log on straight away and take a look. All the training that we make is actually kind of geared on the online version to be a takeaway piece. So everything is separated into 4-minute chunks that can be quite useful. Coming from an engineering background, there's a lot of times when you may be out on site looking to do something where you have to trawl through masses and masses of documentation just to get to the little bit that you need. So for this, what we've done, we've actually chunked everything up into kind of bite-sized videos that are usually no longer than, say, 4.5 minutes-ish each. So if you wanted to quickly understand how to deploy a Netgear VLAN and deploy IGMP on that VLAN, that would be, 2 videos at 4 minutes apiece. One, watch it, step-by-step guide with voiceovers on how to deploy that VLAN on the switch, what is a VLAN, and then very much the same for things like IGMP snooping and so on for you to do on there. So you only have to ever watch the relevant video to you, which makes it a very handy tool when you're out on site or out configuring, that you can just get to the exact steps that you need, watch those and repeat, and away you go. Now, we don't charge for any of these training courses that we do. Everything is absolutely free of charge. We believe that to be more of a service for empowerment, and our commitment to our partners and resellers, integrators and users, to ensure they get the skills that they need to deploy one of our solutions. So it's certainly something we shall never charge for. This is a breakdown of what you get when you do the ProAV course, and this is only the initial offering for us. So the Netgear Academy is actually only very newly launched. So it actually hasn't been around long at all. The first 2 courses it launched with were these AV over IP courses. We are busy working away in the background, and there's going to be a host of more courses coming in the future. So don't fear if you sign up, get yourself certified, and there's nothing left to do. You're going to see a massive influx of new training courses, design ones, theory-based ones, sales-based ones. So they're all in the works. We very much consider the 2 different courses mix. So potentially, if you don't have such a good background in networking, you're not so familiar with terminology, configurations, and switching, then this is the course that we highly recommend. It is a full 8-hour day. We run you from the morning all the way through OSI networking, IP classes, DHCP servers, everything you can imagine, from beginning to end, all the way into what is a class A, B, C network, subnetting, all these types of things, all the relevant bits. And it's very much a course designed to kind of upskill you from very minimal networking knowledge to all the way to having the relevant IP networking knowledge to deploy an AV over IP system, but not just to deploy, but also understand what it is that you're doing. When we get to the on-site course, this is very much geared up to be the kind of course that you can look at if you have relevant knowledge, you understand switching, potentially Netgear switching, and this is only probably 60 to 120 minutes worth of learning. So we kind of skip the how-tos, and so in fact we keep the how-tos, but we kind of get rid of a little bit of the whys that take a longer time to explain. So this is a good place to start. If you find yourself potentially you need more knowledge, you get yourself, when we are up and running, keep up with us and we'll send out schedules of when you can get on the online ones. Obviously, you get your certifications, you get your badges. If you do want to display your badge proud, there's one for online, one for the instructor led. You also get your AVIC certificates. And this is our ProAV engineering service. And this is free to anybody who buys ProAV switches from Netgear. So it's 24/7 all across North America, Europe, Asia Pacific. You get access to all our ProAV experts. We have a pretty big burgeoning team of ProAV guys, dedicated ProAV guys on Netgear. You get technical training, white papers, product. If you need help with configurations, deployment support, troubleshooting, you need new features, you need to relay that to product management. All of these things are available to you at ProAV Design at netgear.com. So very much if you do take a note of one thing, make it this email address. If you've got any requirement in ProAV, you could be potentially wanting to know what products to use, how to deploy them with different technologies, different versions. Maybe you're using KDS4s or KDS6s. You need to know which products would be right for you. This is absolutely there to make the job easy, and I would absolutely say take advantage of that. That will take a lot of the hard work. And where the configs get complicated, you're not sure what to do, reach out and we can help you create and deploy those configurations, as well as troubleshoot should you get issues. Everyone is on there, all the way from guys like myself, all the ProAV SEs from EMEA, North America, worldwide, Asia Pacific. You've got product management from ProAV on there, Laurent Marcia, who heads up the managed switch and ProAV lineups. At Netgear is also on there, Chiefs of Engineering. So everyone relevant, everything you send into that is automatically logged into our ProAV case system. So it's all very official and it works really, really well. If you do take a solution or design out there, it all comes in a nice pack. It's all packaged up with all the features and bill of materials and stuff that you would need. So do take advantage of that. Now, I'm going to take a pause on my question and I'm going to hand over to my good colleague, Mark. So this is Mark Collins. He is, like I said, the technical specialist and training specialist, the guy I've got a lot of time for over at Kramer. So Mark, thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kieran. Excellent. Well, I'm just going to share my screen. Just give me 2 seconds. Excellent. Well, yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, guys. Basically, I'm going to start with just sort of a bit of an overview, really, of Kramer as a company, because I realise that some people may not be fully familiar with us. Let's just go into here. So basically, in 1981, Dr. Kramer actually founded Kramer Electronics. Dr. Kramer is actually a medical doctor by trade, but he also had a very keen interest in electronics in his spare time. And over the years, obviously that grew and grew to a point where he decided to start a company, and that's been his pure focus since that time. As it mentions here, we've got hundreds of employees and partners all across the world, so 6 different continents. And we've been a leader in ProAV since really conception of the company. So yeah, over 26 offices around the world. And really what we're focusing on these days is kind of end-to-end solutions, also encompassing like latest cloud technologies and software applications, that sort of thing. So that's really where our sort of collaboration with Netgear made sense, because obviously this begins to move into their sort of world. Just to show just a brief sort of overview, as this shows here, we really cover every continent in the world. So in terms of having not just sales offices, but also technical offices in different areas. Obviously, I myself are from the UK technical side of things. So yeah, we really do cover lots of different areas of the world. And then also different market sectors, pretty much every market sector you can think of, we have equipment that can assist you, whether it's a full system, whether it's parts of a system, but we're kind of a go-to company for, for really any kind of AV needs. So moving on from kind of just an overview of the company, really just talking about, I guess, sort of our training center, because that's the whole point of all this. And before I talk about the training center itself, I want to just mention about our Kramer Academy. So obviously we've heard there about the Netgear Academy. The Kramer Academy is a very similar sort of concept. Basically with the Kramer Academy, we have a whole range of online courses which you can take. They're free to do, they're free for our dealers, they're free for our customers. And the idea is that basically we want you to be more informed on our technologies that we make and really to help you out in the field. You also can get certification and AVIXA renewal points as well for some of the courses. So the online courses, I mean, they include courses on AV over IP. We have Kramer Control, which is our new cloud-based sort of control system. And I'll briefly go over that a bit later. AV Fundamentals. AV Fundamentals is absolutely brilliant for those coming across into the AV sector. So if we're looking at, let's say, IT technicians that are very clued up in that field, but perhaps haven't moved into AV in the past, AV Fundamentals will tell you things about signal transmission, connector types, do's and don'ts, that kind of stuff. So it's less of a manufacturer-based course and more of like an overview on how to get started in AV. So it really is very useful. We also have audio specialist courses, and it mentions there about VIA, sales and installer. So I'll talk more about the VIA in a few minutes. And as it mentions here, there are AVIXA renewal points available when you're completing some of these courses. So you can get access to the Academy here. You don't have to worry too much about writing this down now, because we will send out copies of all of this after the event. So obviously at the moment, online learning is really where it's at. And when it comes down to obviously sort of getting back to normal, I guess, we of course then run a range of in-house courses. Now with the in-house courses, obviously the real benefit of doing those is the fact that you're getting hands-on with the kit. There's face-to-face interaction. The idea is really you can come into us and break the equipment here rather than breaking it for the first time in front of the customer. So we help you through those little stumbling blocks, and really help you to try and stop making those first sort of mistakes that may occur when you're first starting out with a new technology or something like that. We also run custom sessions for integrators and their end users. So basically, if you're an AV integrator, if you're an IT reseller that's moving into the AV field, or if you've got an end user that you've done an install, they've got some Kramer equipment, they're interested in the technologies, we can actually sometimes do sort of a custom session for you and actually cover just particular topics that you'd like to talk about. So that's something to bear in mind. So you can reach out to us, and that's something that we can do for you. So in terms of the actual Kramer Training Center itself, so the Kramer Training Center, we spoke to Netgear, it must have been probably a couple of years ago now, originally, and basically the training center has been going for about 5 years now, but basically the idea of the training center is something that we call the Kramer Collaborative Classroom. So with the Kramer Collaborative Classroom, the idea is that you have a mixture of display and audio devices in the room, and basically you've got the ability to route video and audio flexibly between screens. The instructor can also assist any of the pods in the room. So basically there are actually 4 separate pods in the room, and I'll show a picture of the training center in a moment, the full center. So in the room we have 4 separate training pods. Each pod comprises of what we call a VIA device. So the idea is you can bring any device and wirelessly present to the screen. You can annotate, you can interact, do all that side of things. Whatever is displaying on any of the pods, we can send to any other screen in the room. As the instructor at the front of the room, I could bring an image from a pod and I can interact with that directly without having to involve the whole center. So it's really quite flexible. The idea is flexible routing of everything. And of course, AV over IP really falls into that category of allowing flexible routing any to any. So any device you turn up with, you can present in here. So in most cases, we generally have up to 15 people. So they're relatively small sessions. We try and keep them personal. And the idea is that really, hopefully it allows for sort of more effective learning and that kind of thing. Sometimes we also do internal staff training, and we also do smaller sessions with specific integrators. So as I mentioned before, we can sometimes do almost like one-on-one sessions to guide you through a particular technology, or maybe even sit down and help you design a project or something along those lines. So yeah, we try and use the space flexibly in that sense. In a normal week, so when we're not under lockdown, we're normally running quite a few courses every week, and these courses, they complement the online academy. So the idea is that with the online academy, you can get certified, you can get the information that you need, but at the same time, the idea is that the courses, when you come in, can fill in some of the gaps maybe that are left, or sort of let you actually get hands-on with the equipment, as I mentioned before. But as it says here, with the actual hands-on sessions, the reason we keep them small is because it means that people can actually get hands-on with the technology. So we're allowing everyone to have one of each device, and we're allowing people to really get involved and try and do things. So yeah, so that's the kind of approach that we take. So you might be asking, how has Netgear really sort of helped us. How do they come into this whole picture? So basically, in terms of the Kramer Collaborative Classroom, obviously the initial premise was something called HD-Base-T, and HD-Base-T, if you're not familiar, is effectively a technology for extending HDMI and audio and some control elements over Cat6 cabling. We moved from that to a network infrastructure, and initially over 1 gig, that was fine. The current training room setup actually includes just like a single core switch from Netgear. So previously we had about 3 switches in a stack. We had separate routers. We had all sorts of other things going on. What we've done with Netgear is we've consolidated it all into one package. It allows us much faster Wi-Fi. And it also allows us the ability to have some real flexibility in how we set things up in the room. So here we've got, we have one of the M4300 96.
Guys, can anyone else hear Mark? I think we seem to have lost Mark here. Can you hear me? I'm still here, right? I think we've lost Mark down a hole somewhere. Fear not, Netgear to the rescue. I shall do my best Mark impression. He's on another subnet. I like that. Very good, David. Right, I'll tell you what, just while we establish where we've lost Mark, has he gone to the pub? I hope he's socially distancing if he has. Right, give me 1 second, guys. I've got a copy of his slides. So just while we find Mark, let me pull up his slides. Right, stop participant sharing. Give me a second, guys. Bless Mark, his actual internet went down 10 minutes before this webinar started, and he had to drive to the office to get back on. So I don't know, potentially maybe the internet at their office potentially may have gone down because it is auto BT. Oh, Mark is there. He's coming back. Mark, I've got a copy of your slides up here with everyone, so I can get you back to the right place if you like.
Here we go.
Mark, don't worry.
Hi there. I'm sorry, I have no idea what went on there. I think, I'm not sure exactly which point I dropped out. Right,
where are I? Might let you get back to the right place. And if you wanna share yours, or
yeah, I should be good. If you bear with me. It's the oh, let's have a look. I'll tell you that should be good. So yeah, okay. I think I was okay. So I was at the point on this one here. I'm not sure quite where I got to, where I sort of dropped out in terms of explanations here. But so if I just start again, just briefly on this one. So we've obviously got one of the M4300 96X switches that Kieran mentioned earlier on, and one of the WAC 540 access points running 4 wireless SSIDs. And then 8 separate VLANs running on running 3 different types of streaming. So Dante audio, so very low latency IP-based audio, standard multicast at 1 gig, and SDVoE multicast at 10 gig. So what this switch has allowed us to do effectively is remove some of the bottlenecks that Kieran was talking about previously. And also in terms of things like wireless latency and just general latency in the room, it's massively reduced because now the bandwidth is there to deal with everything that we're doing. So yeah, I don't know if you want to go on to the next slide then, Kieran.
Yep.
Excellent. Okay, so collaborative classroom in action. So basically, as it mentions here, so the Kramer training environment's been touring the UK. And so what we've actually done, so the collaborative classroom that we use here, we actually take it around the UK and bring it to generally to higher education institutes and that sort of thing. And that's something that that Netgear has actually supported us with as well. So it's something called the Sticky Campus Roadshow. It's obviously been going since 2016, and it's in conjunction with JISC. So if you're not familiar with JISC, they're the people that bring you Eduroam in amongst other things. But yeah, so the idea with the Sticky Campus Roadshow is, as it says, there is a collaboration between manufacturers. So obviously Kramer provide a lot of the equipment in the room. We have the Kramer VIA devices. We have our AV over IP solutions, things like that. Obviously, Netgear provide the networking, and then we also have screen and furniture manufacturers, that sort of thing, involved. So that's been all around the UK. It's actually installed in some institutes around the UK as well. Oh, could you just go back a sec, Kieran? Yeah. Thanks, mate. So yeah, as it mentions there, the KCC includes a whole range of different technologies. So aside from the Kramer VIA side of things, obviously our AV over IP solutions, and also it has Kramer control involved as well. So I don't know if you can go forward there, Kieran. Just and then once more. Okay. So just to quickly explain just about the technology itself. So in terms of the VIA devices, so obviously I mentioned them a whole bunch of times, we call it, we term it as true collaboration. So the idea is that you can do wireless presentation, you can bring any device you want. So we work with Windows, Mac OS, Android, iOS, even Linux, Chromebooks, everything you can think of. So the idea is that we don't exclude anyone. You can turn up and you can present with pretty much any technology you bring. We can do iOS mirroring, and we can also support Mirrorcast as well. So that's another method that you can use. Obviously, as it says there, you can chat and share files. We've got whiteboard functionality. If you link it to a touch screen, there's a whole bunch of other things you can do with it. And one of the key things with the VIA is how it streams HD video. So we have a special multimedia feature that allows you to get full frame rate when you're playing back 1080p video, 60 frames. So it's a real standout technology there. We've won a number of awards for the VIA over the years, and it just continues to improve, really. I don't know if you want to move on, Kieran. Okay, so what is VIA? So VIA comprises of, generally, it's dedicated hardware. So we have some appliances, VIA devices, which are pre-configured to go. We have a whole range of different types. They have different feature sets. Now, I won't go into all the details today, but the idea is you have a VIA device in the room. That device will connect into your network. So the VIA is actually a network streaming device rather than a point-to-point Wi-Fi device like some of the other devices out there. So the idea is that this will run through your infrastructure. It relies on the fast Wi-Fi from the Netgear access point, and obviously the switching infrastructure. And then the best way of using it is to use the software. So we have purpose-built software to allow you to present and to use all the features. Now, the software on the right-hand side there has a whole bunch of icons there. That's basically showing you, it's like a demo sort of image, as it were. But the idea is that you customize the VIA to the environment it's going in. So you'll generally have maybe, say, 3, possibly 4 icons there, something like that. We've just seen something come in there. Yes, you are right that yeah, the VIA installer certification is available on the Kramer Academy, and it goes through all the details from basically the kind of stuff I'm talking about here, but also how to actually configure the VIA from scratch, how to actually integrate it into a network. It's a really useful course, so it's definitely worth taking a look at. And I don't know if you want to move on to the next. Right, so then we've got Kramer control. So I mentioned about Kramer control. This slide here actually shows a pretty good sort of idea of how the control system can work. So the idea is if you have a cloud connection or connection to the Kramer cloud, then effectively you have a processor in the room, or a brain as we call it, and that brain will connect to the clouds and allow you to do live updates to a room, allow you to get statistics, allow you to press buttons remotely, all sorts of things like that. So you've also got the ability for separate rooms to talk to each other. So when you create a Kramer control system, you actually, let's say in this scenario here, you've got 3 brains, the red boxes on the wall there, let's say. Those brains are actually aware of each other and they can communicate between each other. So you can really create a smart control system very quickly, very easily, drag and drop, no sort of coding involved or anything like that. Can we move on to the next one? Thanks. So what is Kramer control? So as I say, you start with a brain. You can add a touch panel or a button panel. There's no software required. So it's got a cloud-based builder. So one of the beauties of this is the fact that because it's cloud-based, I could log on my own laptop here. Let's say I then leave my laptop at the office and I pop around Kieran's and I want to carry on programming or something like that. I can carry on from wherever I was without downloading any software. All I need is my username and password. Likewise, if you're configuring a system and let's say you need some assistance from my team, or you want to, let's say, get another programmer involved or something like that, you can invite people into your projects and allow them permissions to do that. So it's really, really flexible. And just one other point on that slide, Kieran, if you just go down a little bit. There you go. So there is an offline mode, so no internet is necessary. So the whole point is that even though this is a cloud-based system, it can function as a separate offline system. You don't need that cloud connection to make it work. So that's a really, really critical thing. You can do uploads offline. You can download the program file from the cloud and you can upload it onto the brain separately. So everything can run in offline mode if you want it to, because I know initially that was one of the questions that used to come up quite a bit.
That's a really cool feature that you can invite people in as well.
Yeah. So you can invite people in with different permissions. So the idea being that with you can invite people in as, say, let's say there's like an IT manager and they can see statistics on how the rooms are being used and that kind of stuff, and have that kind of information to hand, but maybe not have access to the full builder. And there are all these different levels where you can sort of decide what people can see. So, and then obviously aside from that, being Kramer, we make many thousands of different types of devices in the audiovisual space, and obviously moving more into the IT space as well these days. So pretty much anything you can think of. There's another slide there as well, which has some more bits on there. So the next one along. You can see we cover pretty much everything end to end. So whether you need desk connectivity, if you need, let's say, audio video switching, you need control, some form of routing, distribution, we do everything you can think of. We run out of our UK warehouse here, which is very well stocked. So the whole point is that we can generally have stuff to you for either next day or even same day delivery in some cases. And then, the next slide here is just saying about some awards. I don't know if you can still hear me.
Yep, I think.
Good. Yeah, excellent. Yep. Good stuff. Brilliant. So just a few of the awards in 2019. Not trying to blow our own trumpet too much, but we actually, I'm quite proud of some of these. So certainly the one at the top left there talks about our new audio DSP. And basically our DSP, it's configurable matrix DSP, has a whole bunch of really neat features. Again, no software involved with that at all. It's all web-based control, that sort of thing. Very, very flexible, very good, with Dante built in as well. Mentions down the bottom left about Brainware. So Brainware is basically a Kramer control, a software version of the Kramer control brain. You can contact us for more details on that. In the top right, I'm particularly proud of that one because our technical support team globally got selected as the community's favourite manufacturer, which is very nice to hear.
Well deserved that.
Yeah, thank you, mate. then down the bottom right, we have an award there for our networked power amplifier, the PA240Z, which has been a really good seller over the last year or so. Very, very flexible, built-in mixer on the front ends, and both line level and either switchable 100-volt line or low impedance for the outputs. And I think that's about it, actually, Kieran. Yeah, it is. So there you go. So there's a bit of information on the screen there. So if you had any questions at all, you can email us directly on that email address, or you can call us directly. I'm one of the guys that will normally be answering the phone. So yeah, we can talk about any of these bits if you need to. And obviously, Kieran will be sharing the slides as well after this.
Absolutely. So we're so the case study that we've got going on with Kramer, that's in a lovely digital PDF format. So we'll share the slides, we'll share the case study with you guys. So we get both of our slides, we get that PDF case study that can be used to look at for collateral or to pass along for people. We'll send out anything relevant. If you did have any questions that you had along the way, please feel free. If you want to ask them now, me and Mark will be hanging around for a couple of minutes. If you didn't get to ask something that you think of, if not, fear not. We've put all our contact details. So I'm just typing all our contact details. Oh, I'll tell you what, Mark's even beat me, but I'm still typing support. So there you go. So if you do want to email anything that you might think of later, then please do feel free to reach out to either of us. You've obviously got my personal email there. And you've also got our ProAV design email that you can email to, and you'll hit the whole global team at Netgear. You've got the support one at Kramer, so you'll hit the whole of the team over there at Kramer as well. Obviously, we're not up and running at the moment, but when we do up and running, do take the opportunity. I've had the pleasure of being able to head down to the Kramer facilities. So do, when stuff returns to some type of norm, get up there and take advantage. It is a very, very good setup with a lot of their products in play there. So it's great to go and test, and I call it learning, but really for guys like me, it's actually a bit of playtime. But it's a good thing to go and get involved in. Likewise, when we're up and running, do check it out and come down and see us. I think we've answered. There was one question actually for you, Mark. Are your kits Energy Star?
Some of them are. It depends on the type of technology. So, like some of the amplifiers are, for instance. I believe my understanding on that certification is there's certain types of device that are sort of more required to be compliant with that than others. So, yes, some of the amplifiers that we do are. So it just depends. But if you want more information, if you contact us, and I can look into specific products and that sort of thing.
Perfect. There's another one just on how far off is VIA from being Teams certified?
Yeah, so that is very close, I'm told. We are already running internal betas and that sort of thing, and we're quite open with that information actually. But yeah, in terms of timescales, obviously things have been pushed back a little bit. I think we're maybe looking at sort of end of Q3, something like that. But again, we can, as soon as we have some information on that, we'll do a mailer, and we'll make sure that people are aware of that info, because it will be a free firmware update for anyone that has the VIA Connect Plus at the moment.
Awesome.
Obviously, if you've already got a campus, then you can install Teams on there straight away, and you can just use it as you would any other room PC, basically.
Fantastic. Here's we've got one from Stephen here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any plans for Dante speakers?
We do indeed, actually, and that's a very good little prompt there, actually, Stephen. Thank you. Yeah, we have some Dante speakers, which are, again, they're due out, I believe, end of Q3, start of Q4. Unfortunately, with the whole COVID situation, there are certain things that have been pushed back slightly in terms of R&D, but we're working as hard as we can to get those out. So again, we have there are test items sort of at the factory stages. So yeah, in a few months' time, you'll start seeing those coming about, and we're looking forward to them, because they're going to really sort of boost our lineup of Dante products. We have quite a few already, but the speakers are really quite neat, and they're tying quite well actually with the Netgear switches. They're PoE speakers, built-in amplifiers, and Dante endpoints. So very neat little products. Those.
Big fan of the Dante stuff.
Yep.
All our video walls are now Dante speakers with DSP built in, all PoE powered. Actually, yeah, I mean, I've got loudspeakers and ceiling tiles. Ceiling tiles actually even come in under 15 watts, so you don't even need PoE plus.
Yeah.
So I can see we've got another one. Oh, we've got an anonymous one here.
Oh, here we go.
This one is, what was the Netgear link for the online course best for complete beginners, i.e. Sparky venturing into underfloor heating controls, programming and home automation? Oh, going for it. I like it. So at the moment, you probably want the on-site course. Obviously, that's a little bit difficult in current climate. So if you get yourself over to netgear.academy, sign up for a username, you'll get access to the course that explains in lighter detail what stuff is and shows you how to configure it. But if you send an email to myself, so my email's in the chat window, we'll share it afterwards as well. And we can also set you up with our ProAV design team. I have another colleague who's the senior ProAV SE for EMEA, Neil Smart, who's based in the UK. So we can do a lot of ad hoc sessions. So if you want to see something or have a particular use case, just reach out to me at kpurdy@netgear.com, or you can hit me up on the ProAV design at netgear.com alias. I also sit on that, as well as my other ProAV colleagues. And if you reach out to us on that, we can formulate some kind of program or some sessions, be it remote, to help you get going for sure. So just reach out to us and we can get you going there, Mr. Anonymous. Okay, so I think that looks like us answered. If you do have any questions, you've still got time to get them in. I'm currently hiding from my wife and son upstairs, so feel free to keep me hiding. No, short of making up some questions. Yep, David, you go for it. You get going. Right, I think that takes us to right about the end then. Like I said, if you did have a question that you didn't think of at the time, we'll send some follow-up emails. Feel free to reach out to either myself or Mark at Kramer or any of the aliases, the entire support teams over at Kramer, and likewise the entire team. Genuinely, from both of us, we really appreciate you guys taking the time out and having a look at what we've got going on. Very much thanks to Mark for joining us today as well and putting on such a good presentation. But I think that's probably us. Mark, I don't know if you want to add anything.
Yeah. No, I think that's everything. Just thanks for the opportunity to do this, and thank you for hosting. And yeah, it's all good.
Fantastic.
And yeah, have a good day, everyone.
Likewise. So look, guys, keep safe, keep well. We'll send the follow-up, like I said, so you'll get everything with this, and then hopefully we'll see you guys again very soon. Enjoy the rest of the week.
Bye, everyone.